So since I've been talking about just some of the basic photo editing in Photoshop, let's talk a little bit about basic photo touch-ups of portraits. To keep this simple, I've chosen two pretty well-known public figures. Being public figures, they're more used to people working with images of them, etc. This should be okay. Now I also could have gone to like Flickr Creative Commons and searched for like a portrait in here, making sure that I had like Creative Commons or commercial use and mods allowed, as well as something maybe like minimum size being large just so I had enough room to edit. I could have done something like that. And there are ones in here that I could choose, but I felt a little odd going through a whole bunch of them. I guess I also could have searched headshots. But I thought it felt a little strange using some random person, even if their image was marked as commercial use and mods allowed. I figured a public figure would be a little better. So I'm going to do one of each, and I'm going to try to keep it pretty quick. So I've got David Beckham here, and this photo is fairly good size. And I've got an image of Meryl Streep here. This photo's not as big, but it should still work. I would prefer it to be bigger, but it is what it is. So let's start with this one. So I'm just going to drag it to my desktop, and I'm going to open it with Photoshop. So here we have it at 100%, and I can Command minus or Command plus to zoom in and out like most Adobe software, and I can do Command 0 to make it fill however large my window is currently, which is at 78.54%. I'm going to keep it at full size while I'm doing some of this editing. So it looks pretty decent. So first thing that I feel like the image itself is a little bit cool in color, especially when we look at the hair. It looks a little bluish. So to correct that, I'm going to add in just a little bit of color balance. Bring this over towards a little bit of red, and bring this over towards a little bit of yellow. That looks a little better, a little more natural. Still have a little bit of a blue sheen on his hair, but not as bad. And I could buy that being lighting that's in the area. Although the whole thing's due to lighting really, but that's okay. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this background layer. I'm going to use this healing brush. Now right now it's really large, so I'm going to shrink it down. I could shrink it down way up here, or I could use the left bracket or right bracket to decrease or increase the size. And I'm just going to trace along some of these lines to reduce some of the wrinkles. Now I'm not going to get rid of them all together, and I'll explain in just a moment. And this one as well. And there we go. Now this isn't really authentic, and you do have differences in opinion of ethics and how much manipulation is okay. And that probably depends on what is the purpose of your image. If it's news, well, then you probably need it as authentic as possible. But if it's a portrait of someone, then a little bit of editing is expected. Now right now this is too much editing. I've gotten rid of all of those. But I don't leave it that way. I get rid of them, and then I reduce the transparency on this layer, so it's still there because they are part of the features of that person, especially as they age or whatever. But reduce them a little bit, soften them a little bit, and I tend to find that pretty well received. It still has their character, and it's more accurate, but they don't look as harsh as they did before. Now the next thing that I typically do is I add in a black and white layer, and I switch this to luminosity. And let's try auto. I'll normally try auto first and see if I like it. It's okay. I think I need to up some of these a bit. Let's see. Kind of move them around a little bit to try to figure out how I like them. So now I'll zoom out a little bit because the details aren't as important here. It's more of the overall fill. I think that's good. That blue needs to be a little bit lighter. There we go. And let's play with the levels just a little bit as well. So we'll lighten the whole thing up a little bit. I like to crush the blacks typically. So that looks pretty good. Might want to darken this a little bit. There we go. And contrast. A little less contrast on portraits is typically well received. I'll also go in and grab a quick lasso around him. Actually, let's do it a little bit bigger than that. Scalable to the code as well, so Command C and Command V, and we're going to switch this to overlay, and we'll do a high pass. The larger the photo, the higher the radius typically has to be for you to notice the difference. Since this is a fairly small photo, we can notice it pretty easily. So you can see the difference, just a little bit of extra sharpness. I don't want it sharper everywhere, just in a few spots. So with my eraser, I'm going to especially soften any of the edges, and especially what's behind him. And then let's soften the skin a bit, because I just pretty much want the features to be sharper. We can soften some of this, or rather really just erase the sharpening effect. I don't know if I want that much attention to the beard, so let's get rid of some of that sharpening. It's not quite that important. And don't be afraid to really zoom in to do some editing. It might feel a little weird at first, but you'll get over it. Good. And I'm pretty happy with this overall. I think the only thing that still bothers me is this person in the background. I'm assuming they're taking a photo. I'm guessing that's a cell phone. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to actually add another black and white layer, because I think that will definitely help. Let's not get rid of all the color. Let's just reduce it quite a bit. And now on our quick mask, let's just erase. Now on this layer with the overlay, I erased the layer directly, but I could have done a quick mask and it probably would have been a better idea, but I just didn't think about it at the time. So I'm going to remove his color, so that way he stays the main subject, because the contrast between the less saturated backgrounds and Mr. Beckham being significantly more saturated should keep our focus on him and reduce the amount of attention that she draws in the backgrounds. And we could probably even magnify that a little bit. If we wanted to, maybe bring up another duplication here. And maybe do a tilt shift blur. So this mimics, it's not the exact same, but it mimics how a certain lens that you can use, or lens attachment that you can use on a camera, captures parts of your visual field in focus and the rest out of focus. And that might help a little bit with this. We'll give it a shot and see what we think. Alright, maybe increase the blurriness a little bit. Come on. Maybe that's too much. Yeah, we'll try it. We'll see what happens. Let's drag that underneath my layers. Maybe... I guess I can go underneath this one too. Yeah, I would say that helps a bit. And let's just erase this little bit there, just so that looks right. That is a little bit of a flare on the camera lens, some light somewhere. And we'll erase the edges of the jacket because those probably shouldn't be blurry. It looks pretty good. So we went from this to that. Now you might say, well, that doesn't really look like it's been that heavily photoshopped. And that's the point. It shouldn't. It should look like a nicer, clearer, better shot, and shouldn't look photoshopped. If your photo looks photoshopped and it's a portrait, or it's supposed to represent something real and not something imaginary or surreal or crazy fantastic, then you're photoshopping wrong. You want the image to look believable, and you want someone to say, well, actually, you don't even want them to think about Photoshop.